I goof around in Blender for a living. Sometimes it's for clients, sometimes it's to find something to teach you guys, but I spend a lot of time in there. And despite having a pretty good grasp of the software, I always find myself stumbling upon some new tool or function that Blender has tucked away somewhere. So today I've put together a list of 10 things that I thought were pretty cool, maybe helpful little time-saving tips, just to make life in Blender a little bit easier. Now, fair warning, I do have a new tool out. It's called Sweet Buttons Pro. It's just a small little UI panel that takes multi-click functions and just boils them down to a few easy buttons. I will be Trojan horsing some product placement into today's video, but that won't be the main focus. If you are interested in that, or you're convinced by the end of this video, you can pick it up at mograph.com. It'll be linked in the description below. All right, let's get to it. All right, for our first tip, we're going to go over local collection visibility. Now, oftentimes in Blender, as you start working with stuff, especially if you have a more complicated scene, things get kind of cluttered. You have a lot of visual clutter here. You got lights, you got a bunch of meshes, and you might just want to focus on one in particular thing. Now, I'm pretty sure all of us understand and at some point have used Shift H to hide everything and just solo something so that you can work out some details or maybe model on it a little bit, maybe texture some the finer details. But what if you want to focus on modeling or texturing or detailing something in one window with it soloed, and you want to have the full context of the render in the other viewport? So if we split the viewport here, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. In this 3D viewport, I'll just use this to snap into my camera view here. And I'm just going to go into render view so that we can see what's going on. So if I grab this piece right here and I just hit Shift H, you can see that it solos the base in this viewport, but it also solos the base in my camera as well. That's because it's changing the visibility globally on a global scale. So we want to localize the visibility of this in particular viewport. So because I have everything split into these nice tidy collections here, I can open my sidebar within, and then I can go down to View. And down here under the Collections tab, you'll see the option to tick on Local Collections just like that. And when you do that, you can go through here and you can actually tick off anything that you don't want to be visible. So as you can see, I just ticked off everything but my base here. So I can kind of zoom in here and take a look at this. But then you can also see over here, everything is still visible. And it's not that this is just a still render. This is a fully real-time render. In fact, if I go in here and I start moving some of these things, you can see that it is changed in this render, or in this viewport as well. This is just a way to localize the visibility of things. So that's really helpful for stuff like projects with a whole bunch of different meshes, a whole bunch of different lights or armatures, and you just want to focus on one thing. It's really great for view layers if you want to kind of condense and optimize your viewport so that you can focus instead of having all these distractions of a whole bunch of different stuff. It's really helpful for that, to just kind of stay focused and get in there and be able to detail things pretty quickly. Okay, our second tip is light linking. Now, light linking is one of those things, it's used ubiquitously across the 3D industry. I'm pretty sure most people have heard of it, most people use it. It's relatively new within the last few years to Blender, so I'm sure there are quite a few artists who don't use it or who have never heard of it. So I'm just going to throw that in here as tip number 2, because if you're not using light linking, it is a very helpful tool, and it's pretty simple. I feel like a lot of artists or even tutorials seem to try to overcomplicate it, but it really is as simple as basically clicking a button. So let me show you kind of how to use it, first of all, but also why it's useful. So if I turn on my render mode here and I add in a sunlight, we'll go here. Everybody knows how much I love the sun object in Blender. And I'm just going to kind of rotate this around. And really, the primary function that I'm trying to accomplish here is illuminating the background. I have a very dark background here, and really what I want to do is illuminate that, but keep my geometry here, the containment tube, to be the same, to be lit in the same way. Right now it has this really nice kind of dynamic lighting, and I'd like to keep that intact. So with the sunlight here, I'm going to go here and I'm going to pump it up a little bit, give it some juice. I'll set it to 5. 5 might be a lot, so I'll put it back down to 3. And that looks really good, but as you can tell, it's actually kind of beating up on my lighting situation here. So if I go to my object properties right here, it'll be the little orange cube or square or whatever that is. We can go down to shading right down here, and under the light linking tab, we can just select a collection. I'm going to choose Psych. This is, once again, a very good reason to name all of your layers and collections, and I guess there's no layers in here. Name your collections and your objects so that you can pay attention and make sure you understand what's going on in your file. So now that we have this linked only to this Psych layer, if we open the Psych collection here, we can see that this piece of geometry here is the only thing in the Psych collection, and subsequently it's the only thing being affected by the sunlight. If I, turn this sunlight way down or turn it way up, the lighting scenario, save for a little bit of indirect bounce light, is relatively the same with my geometry that's not in the cyc here. So I can further demonstrate that by turning this red, and the only thing that you're getting lit by the red is the bounce off of the ground plane here. So that's something worth noting. I think that light linking is a really powerful thing. It's really useful for stuff like product animation and product visualization. I think it's really useful for all kinds of different lighting scenarios where you need a lot more control. It's an industry standard practice at this point, so if you're not utilizing that or working that into your workflow, I highly suggest you take tip number 2 and stuff it right into your workflow. Our third tip for today is naming organization. Now, naming is really important, specifically if you're working on kind of a shared project or you have to hand it off to another artist. If you're taking it into something like Unreal or Substance Painter where you need to kind of keep track of assets, or if you're just working with armature, naming conventions in armature is also really important. So naming your objects can get really annoying if you have a whole bunch of objects, but I do recommend you do it anyway, especially if you're working on a project where you're going to want to pick it up in a few months or you're going to want to hand it off to somebody. Name your objects. And it's really easy. In the outliner, you double click it and then you can type it in. You can also, in the viewport, you can just hit F2 and you can rename it from there. But a really key piece to naming conventions, especially in regards to rigging specifically in the animation industry, is prefix and suffix. So for something like a bone, it might be, this might be called, scanner underscore rig or underscore bone. Or if this bone was on the right side or on the left side, it would be underscore R or underscore L. If you're working with baking, you need underscore HP for high poly, underscore LP for low poly, that kind of stuff. And it can get really annoying to have to go in here and double click and underscore LP or underscore whatever. Or in this case, to keep things more concise and visually condensed, I would put in light underscore key, because the outliner by default organizes things alphabetically. So if I wanted to keep all my lights together, it would need to be light underscore and then whatever light that is. So I can do that pretty easily by selecting all of these, and then I can go up to edit and down to batch rename. And now I have this actually really great powerful renaming tool that allows me to change the name, add suffix, prefix, whatever. So we're going to go to set name and we're going to put in a prefix. I'm going to do light underscore and then click OK. And that just batch renamed all of these to light underscore exactly what they are. And as you can see, where the camera was in the middle before because of the alphabetical order, it's now at the top and all of my lights are grouped like this. Now, that is a really powerful and a great tool, but if you want something that works a lot faster and allows you to iterate quickly or just batch rename things very quickly with the prefix or suffix, that's where SweetButton Pro really comes in handy right here. You can see that. The first tool that I have up here in my little suite of tools is the name changer. So if I grab both of my area lights here, I'm going to change this to suffix and I'm going to rename this to area, and then I can click rename. And as you can see over here, it adds underscore area as the suffix to both of these. Same thing here, I'm going to do sun because the background light here is a sunlight. And I'm going to do underscore point because this right here is a point light. And so that is just a very quick and easy tool to add prefixes and suffixes. You can change the mode right here. You type whatever you want and you click rename. This works for single objects. This works for batch objects. You can select as many objects as you want. And it also works for renaming, or rather adding a prefix or a suffix to bones in pose mode. So that is the first tool of SweetButtons Pro. And I'm excited to kind of dig in and show you the rest of the tools as we go along. All right, now tip number 4 is going to be simplification. Now simplification is pretty simple. It's well named. Essentially what it's going to do is it's going to optimize our viewport stuff, and it's going to give us the ability to really limit the amount of subdivisions, the amount of the resolution of texture, the amount of child particles to particle generators. It's going to give us control over that with the click of a button. So you can see this pretty easily. If I move this around, this is me, by the way, in my underpants, so there you go. So if I move this mesh around, it's really not a big deal. The performance is fine, it's relatively lean, it works pretty well. Now if I crank the subdivision surfaces up to 2, or up to 4 rather. I'm increasing it by 2 up to 4. If I go into pose mode now and try to move this around, it is much more jittery. It's a lot heavier. Now, I would never have this be 4 subdivisions. That's incredibly excessive. However, there are instances where you would have really heavy hair. Maybe you have fur or fuzz. Maybe you have a lot of characters that all have subdivision surface on. There are scenarios where you would have a really heavy project, and you would want to easily be able to check the quality of the render, or check the normals of an object, or the fullness of a hair or a fur, but then also turn it back off to have optimized performance. So let me show you exactly how I'm going to do that. So we're going to go up to the render properties up here. It'll be this the back of a camera, and we're going to go to simplify. Now if I toggle this down and turn this on, we can see that nothing really happened, and that's because everything is pretty much as it is. I don't have more than 6 subdivisions, no child particles, all that. However, what I can do is change this. So I can drop this down to 0 or even 1. I like to typically keep it at 1 so I don't lose, all of my subdivisions. And then you can crank the particles down to 0. I can set the texture limit, which is especially helpful if I have a lot of 4K textures or even the HDRI in the background. I can just kind of keep that and choke that down to 128, so that's the texture resolution that's being projected. And I can even restrict the volume resolution. Now I don't use volumes very often. I don't really do that kind of work typically. But if I did, I could change the resolution of it, which is really great. I can also change how it portrays in renders. Now I typically turn simplify off before I render, so this really doesn't matter. But if you wanted to kind of constrain or control a render, you can do this very easily with kind of a subdivision override or a particle override here as well. Super cool and a useful tool for just optimizing performance while in Blender. And one more thing, while you're here, go ahead and do yourself a favor, especially if you're working with characters or a lot of like fuzz or fur. Right click the check mark and go down to change shortcut or add shortcut. And I always do Command Shift and 1 to toggle in between my simplify and not. You can see there I'm doing Control Shift and 1, and then you can see over here in the panel it's getting to work. So just to show you the difference here is simplify off and simplify on. Massive difference in performance. All right, for tip number 5, we're going to go over how to use Eevee as a pre-visualization renderer. So a lot of times when I'm working, especially with like lighting or texturing, I like to be able to see what I'm doing, more so than just the material preview. I like to look at the cycles. Now I prefer cycles as a renderer. I think it looks a lot nicer. It's more familiar to me coming from like Redshift or Arnold than some of maybe the Eevee gotchas, but regardless, it is still not a real-time renderer. It's very fast. It's blazingly fast comparatively, but it's still not natively real-time. So it can be kind of a pain to do stuff like changing the HDRI. In fact, I'll show you right here. If I try to rotate the HDRI around, it takes its sweet time. It catches up, and it's still very fast in comparison to other renderers, but it is not real-time, and it's kind of hard and a little bit finicky to dial it in without going little chunks at a time. 55. Okay, no, that's not right. 65. No, that's not right. 70. Stuff like that. Whereas what I would prefer to do is just be able to get the idea of my lighting or get the idea of my textures and kind of know and have at least like a 70% idea of what it's going to look like before I actually turn my cycles render on. That way it doesn't have to just kind of chug through it while I sit there hoping that I got it right. So instead what we want to do is actually use the Eevee renderer to be able to do a lot of the pre-visualization work. So if I go to my render properties here, I can change the render engine from cycles to Eevee just like that, and it doesn't look great. It's not the prettiest thing ever, but we can kind of fix it a little bit so that it looks a little bit nicer. I'm going to change my samples to something like 32, and then I'm going to turn on ray tracing just like that. and I can make sure my resolution is 1:1. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect. It does not have to be the most beautiful thing in the world, but what we do need is some amount of light information so I can move my HDRI around like this and be able to view it in real time without having to wait for it to chug through its processing, which that works perfectly. So now I have this idea and I have a pretty good sense of kind of where I want this HDRI to be. I want it to be about right here, so it kind of brings in light from the side and it kind of casts a shadow from the right to the left. And so now I can go back into cycles and I can view it in render preview, and it looks pretty good. I can see I'm getting light from this side, and of course it's casting the shadow from there. That's great. But I don't want to have to toggle between Eevee and cycles every time I want to view it. That's kind of a beatdown to have to go back and forth between these two. So what I can do to utilize both is to actually go into my material preview. So I can hold Z and go down to material preview. I can also do it up here in the top right of my viewport. And I'm going to go into the shading properties and I'm going to toggle on scene lights and scene world. Now, if you remember, this is actually indistinguishable from my Eevee render. This is in render mode right here in Eevee. And if I go back into cycles, this is in material preview. So now I get the Eevee render engine working side by side with cycles, and I can change it with the click of a quick button like this. So I can go into material preview. I can kind of change where I want my HDRI to be. I can change what my textures need to be. I can change my lighting scenario, whatever I need to change, whatever I need to dial in. And I can start fussing with all of these parameters in Eevee until I get it to where I like it, and then kick it right back over to cycles, and it's pretty much ready. If you're having a good time or you're learning something, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you can let YouTube know I'm getting better at this. I'm really trying to make a concerted effort to put out more content, so your involvement really helps make that possible. And again, if you're interested in checking out SweetButtons Pro, it's available right now for $5 at mograph.com. Check it out and save yourself a few annoying button clicks. Now, tip number 6 is actually kind of what kicked this whole thing off. This is going to be covering kind of hierarchy controlling and parent controlling. It's a super annoying function in Blender that I think takes way too much hassle to actually do it. It's actually what kicked off SweetButtons to begin with. So I'm quite passionate about this particular tip number 6, controlling hierarchies. But yeah, let's just get right into it. So if I have a parent here, we can see this is an empty or a curve object that I have all of these keys and this little panel all parented to. As we can see, if I move it around, it pulls it along with it. Now, if I wanted another keypad to align somewhere on this panel, and I hit Shift D to duplicate it, and I move it, we can see all it does is duplicate the controller. It doesn't duplicate the children. So in order to duplicate the controller with the children, I would have to do one of two things. Either I would have to do it in the viewport, which I would have to do Shift G, select children, and then Shift click this, and then Shift D, and then right click, and then especially if you have armature or other dependencies, best practice is to not transform the parent and the children, is to just transform the parent by itself. So then I would have to go through here and deselect all of these objects little by little, and then I could move my brand new panel. That's super annoying. Another way I could do it, to me it's equally as annoying, but it's still possible. You can go over here into the viewport and tilde key and show active. You can do select hierarchy, again, Shift D. You don't have to deselect the children as is, especially in this particular scenario, but in many scenarios, you would have to select it. So let's just pretend, we don't mind changing the transform data of the children. You then still have to move it to where you want it, and it's not great. So that is a super annoying function, and if I wanted to delete these, I would have to either select the controller and then go into the outliner here, right click and delete the hierarchy, or if I wanted to do it solely in the viewport, it would be Shift G, children, Shift click, select the parent, and then X and delete. Again, super frustrating. So that is actually the starting point of SweetButtons, was to solve this problem. So if you have SweetButtons, I will show you how to use the parenting tools here. Now, if I select the parent, remember I want to duplicate this first, so I can just click duplicate with children. And now if I hit G, I can move this, because the operation that it essentially did was it selected the controller, and then it selected the children, while also keeping the controller selected. It then duplicated the whole hierarchy, and then deselected the children that were parented to the object and kept the object selected. which allows you to duplicate it quickly and then only have the controller selected. So it just simplified that all the way down to a one button right there. And then of course, deleting that, you can kill the whole family, and that deletes the parent and any child objects as well. And then of course, we have the grab with children, and that will just select the parent object and then select anything parented to that object, just in case you want to move it to a collection or link it to a different scene, what have you. This now gives you the control to do that really quickly. So that is the whole point of parenting tools right here. This was the cornerstone of Sweet Buttons. And I've found that it really helps me, especially if I'm doing something like this where I have these like little panels that are all connected to this, or I have like a switch right here and I just want to quickly add more switches. I can just duplicate with children, and then of course I get another switch. Or, you know, maybe I don't want to go through selecting all of this, so I can just select this, kill the family, whatever. It makes little things like that so much easier to iterate quickly and create. And for tip number 7, we're going to go over the annotation pencil. Now, I'm sure almost all of you probably know what the annotation pencil is. It's over here. If you hit T to open up this side tab here, you can grab the pencil and you can just kind of draw over things. Now, it does have the ability to work with keyframes, so you can go forward a few frames and, you know, you can call out things in your animation. I've seen people use it to actually do draw overs of animation to kind of plan their motion. I myself have done that a few times. I've seen people use it to give notes or to present or to hand off a file and call things out. It is really useful. In fact, if you hit in and you go to view over here, I think, yeah, right there, you can change a whole bunch. You can change the color, you can change the opacity, you can add more annotations and annotate the annotations. So it's a really useful tool, and I'm pretty sure everybody to some degree knows that it exists. That's not really a hidden feature of Blender. However, if you go down here and drag out another tab, we're just going to give that even more space right there. And you know what? I'm just going to go into render mode so you can kind of see my goo guy. He's pretty cool. I'm going to change this to shader editor. And what's really neat is you can also use the annotation pencil in the shader editor, which is super cool. So I have a pretty complicated shader here. I guess it's not, you know, massively complicated by a lot of people's standards, but it's more complicated than just a simple cut and dry noise texture. And so it's kind of easy to get lost in. It's especially if I abandoned this and came back to it a few months later, I might not know what's going on. So this is really useful for reminding yourself. It's really useful if you're going to hand off a shader to somebody or a file to somebody to explain what's going on. This, for example, this is how I'm getting my outer glow, the layer weight right here. So I might, you know, communicate pictorially like this and communicate that it kind of looks a bit like a ghost right there. And then another artist that was picking up my work would know that's obviously supposed to be layer weight. That's supposed to be a ghost. So it's great for that. Going forward, when I do tutorials on shader nodes or working the shader editor, this is a great resource to kind of example what's going on, or, you know, kind of call things out or circle things. It's a great tool that is probably completely underutilized within shader editors or compositors or geometry nodes, whatever, but I'm going to be utilizing it a lot more. I think it's a really great addition to these different node editors. So for tip 8, we're going to go over the origin tool. Now, all of you are probably familiar with what the origin point is. I'm going to shift H to, actually, you know what? I'm going to grab the psych too to demonstrate this. Just to solo this base here. And as you can see, the origin point is right there, smack dab in the middle of its geometry. And so if I were to try to scale this, it would scale kind of down into the ground plane, and it would scale from that origin point. Now, you can change what it's actually scaling from up here in the transform pivot, and you can do it from the 3D cursor. So of course it's scaling from the cursor just like that. And then individual origins, if you have multiple things, median point, active element, all that is great. It's just, you know, those are super useful. Bounding box center is pretty much what you need for 90% of your operations. However, if I wanted to scale this from the ground, I would need to tab into edit mode. And I'll go into wireframe here, and then I'm going to grab the bottom points here, and then I'm going to hit Shift S to move my cursor, and that's that little guy right here, the little red and white checkered circle. I'm going to put cursor to selected, and that's just going to take that 3D cursor and snap it to the center of my selection right here. Then I'll tab back into edit mode, right click, go to set origin, and I'm going to set the origin to the 3D cursor. And now you can see the origin is at the very bottom of my little containment tube base here. And if I start to scale it, it does not clip through the ground plane anymore because it is scaling from the ground plane. Super helpful, and if I tab into edit mode, then I can grab all the top ones right here as well. Same kind of thing, Shift S, cursor to selected, tab into edit mode, right click, set origin, 3D cursor. Perfect. Yeehaw. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but that was a lot of button clicking for something as simple and easy as moving an origin point. Now, if you're using the gizmo and you kind of have a more like pseudo Cinema 4D setup, then, I mean, that's pretty easy. You can just go up here and tick a button and move it, but it's a lot of button ticking. It's a lot of movement and having to be kind of precise with it, which is great because if you have something weird, like, you know, you want it to rotate from this end over here, then I can just grab that, and now I have so much control over it, and it works really well. But for everyday tasks, like I want to scale something from the bottom or from the top, or even, here's an even better example of exactly what it is. If I want to add in a cube, and then I want the cube to be on the ground plane already, and without me having to push it up and scale it and then push it down, I would have to go in here and again get all of those, cursor to selected, blah 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 blah. It would be super annoying, so I don't want to do that. Instead, what I want to do is I want to pay $5 and get sweet buttons, and I want to use the origin tool here to go origin to bottom and then selection to cursor, and boom, it's right there on the floor. Or origin to top, and same kind of thing, boom, now it's underneath the floor perfectly just like that. So this is a really easy to use tool right here. Origin to top, origin to bottom, and it does exactly what you would think it would do, and it just makes that operation that's just a little bit finicky and a little bit annoying much easier and much more concise. Now for tip number 9, we're going to go over the Modifier Tools add-on and the power of Alt in Blender. So it is an add-on, but I do believe it comes pre-installed with Blender. So if you don't already have it active, go ahead and hit Command comma, and under add-ons we can just look up Modifier. And under Modifier Tools, you'll find it right there. You can just tick it on, and when you do, if you select an object and go into the Modifier Properties panel, it'll be this blue little wrench here, you'll see that you get 4 buttons up top here, and they all do exactly what they say they do. This first one is Toggle Slack. This is really helpful, especially if you have like 5 or 6 different modifiers going. You can click this and it will just toggle them open and close, just like you could do here with these arrows. You have Delete All, which will just exactly what it says. It will delete all the modifiers that are on this object. You have Apply All, which again will apply all of the modifiers that you have on an object. And then you have the Viewport visibility. So if I toggle this off, it will be invisible here, but if I were to render this, of course, you can see the camera is still active here, which would mean it would still render with those modifiers on. So again, that's something that can be really helpful for optimization, or you just want to turn that off so you can get a good look at it, whatever. That's really helpful for that. Now let's talk about the power of the Alt key in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this dial, and I'm going to duplicate it twice. So I have 3 little dials here, and just for the sake of randomness, I'm going to turn the dials all so they're, aimed different ways. And I want to change the bevel amount of all 3 of these. Now, you could go in here and you could change the amount like this, so I get a much sharper bevel right there. And then you have to click select these, and then have this one as the selected object, and then Command L and copy modifiers, and hey, there we go. Now they're all copied to these 2. But that's an absolute waste of time, and Alt allows you to change the parameters of multiple objects at once. This is something that I think is kind of slept on in Blender, but you can hold Alt and change the parameters of multiple objects all at once. And this doesn't just work for modifiers, this works for a myriad of different attributes inside of Blender. So that's super helpful and allows you to do that. It also allows you, you can remove the bevel from all 3 of them. You can add a new modifier. I'll add another bevel there. And again, holding Alt, I will click that, Alt or Option if you're on Mac. Again, I'm going to hold Option or Alt and pull this up. and it will just change that on all of these different pieces here. So that is super powerful, especially if you're working with a large quantity of different objects. That can really speed up your workflow and allow you to just take a lot more control over multiple objects at once. And finally, our last tip here, tip number 10, is to use modifier stacking and pay attention to the hierarchy of the modifier stack. So here we have the dial that we just kind of went over, but it's split in half and has none of the previous modifiers on it. So in order to make this look like the previous dial, I will need to add a mirror modifier first so that it mirrors across it. I will then need to add a bevel so that we get a nice bevel geometry on each one of the edges, and then I will add a subdivision modifier so that it subdivides it so that we don't get kind of these hard facets with the low polygonal value. So let's go ahead and add a modifier here, and I'm just going to look up mirror. And by default, it will add it into the x-axis, so we can just toggle that off and make sure that it's mirroring over the y-axis. And now we're going to add in a bevel, and I can add in 2 or 3 more segments and then kind of pull these down so that it's not as severe. And now I can add in a subdivision surface, just like this. And I'm going to increase this to 2. So now we have a nice looking dial right here, but if I go ahead and toggle the slack using the modifier tool that we just went over, I can demonstrate how important it is to have the same hierarchy. So if I take this subdivision and I put it first, that means it's going to subdivide the geometry first, and then it's going to mirror it, and then it's going to bevel it. And because of that, you get this super weird looking object. It does not at all look like what we want it to. In fact, if I toggle off all of this, you can see what's happening. It's subdividing this, and then it's going to mirror it, and so you get kind of this weird kind of clipping on the edges there, and then it's going to bevel it, but it's really not going to bevel anything because there's really nothing to bevel because it's using angle-based beveling, and there's nothing with a threshold to start beveling. Same kind of thing if I move this here, but I bevel it first. It's going to be a little bit weird on the mirror because now it's trying to bevel everything first and then it's going to try to mirror the bevel, and it just ends up being a little bit squirrely. So in order for this to work the proper way, you mirror it first so that it becomes a full object, and then it will bevel the mirror itself, and then you can subdivide the beveled and mirrored object so that the subdivision is taking into account the geometry on the edges, giving it that sharper edge. Now, this is all well and good. I'm sure most of you are familiar with how important having a modifier stack is, but I also want to take this opportunity to show you how quick it can actually be. In Sweet Buttons Pro, I also have a button for a modifier stack. Now we can build ourselves a little modifier stack here, and we can select or deselect whatever we need. If we don't need a mirror, we don't have to have a mirror. If we don't need a bevel, we don't have to have a bevel. We can choose exactly what we need, but for this one in particular, we need all 3. We need the mirror, we need the mirror to be mirrored in the y-axis, we need the bevel, and we need the subdivision. So I can click Build Stack, and it will give me a correct hierarchy of the modifier stack. And so I can go in here and I can see, I can add a little bit more sharpness to that, maybe add a couple more segments there. And every single time I use this by default, it's going to add the mirror first, it's going to add the bevel second, and it's going to add the subdivision surface modifier last. That's it for the tips and self-promotion. I hope you found something here in this video that's helpful to you, and I hope you go check out Sweet Buttons Pro. You know me, I'm lazy and I love a good easy button. Be sure to like this video, comment your favorite Blender hack, and subscribe. You can find me on Instagram at sweetboy.motion. I post all kinds of fun stuff over there. Thanks for watching.